We are 11 days away from the NBA draft. This upcoming week is the last full week that we have before the draft. And as we get closer and closer, there's more draft news that comes out about the Chicago Bulls. On today's episode, I want to talk about one of the favorite prospects for the Bulls that I think is starting to make me feel like that's the direction that the Bulls are going. And I'm actually pretty excited about it. But then I also want to talk about some of the more raw, upside-based picks that the Bulls could make in this draft and surprise a few people. We're getting into all that and more, plus the mailbag right after this. What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host, Derek Hayes, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that said, let's go and get into this content for today, y'all. I want to start off talking about where kind of my feelings are right now with the Bulls, and this is just based off me reading tea leaves, so it can completely be false, it can completely be off, because we don't know exactly what the Bulls are doing. K.C. Johnson recently came out and said that the Bulls, alluded to the Bulls have had some private workouts, but that they're playing everything close to the vest when it comes down to the NBA draft and their draft plans. Now, we know that we heard about Igor Dimon. I even said at the time that I kind of felt like that could be a little bit of smoke screening when it comes down to it. But one thing that I do know about AK is that when AK zero ins on something, he basically is focused in on it. Now, we've talked about how the Bulls haven't necessarily interviewed the number of prospects that some other teams have interviewed, even with them having a lottery pick. There are some teams that have interviewed more first-round projected prospects than the Chicago Bulls have, and I think that that's because, and I'm not saying this is I want to be clear here. In no way am I saying that I think this is the right way to do it if this is what they're doing. But I do think that with the Bulls going after or having Drake Powell and Asa Newell in here, and that really kind of being the end of them interviewing or working out first-round level prospects as far as that we know, I do think that the Bulls may feel like they have their guy, right? And here's the thing. The Bulls have drafted players that they have not worked out before. So I want to be clear in this conversation. I'm even saying that I understand what we're talking about here, but I also understand the franchise that I root for. And this has been a team that is very much so, drafted players that they didn't have workouts with. But when you start hearing more of the conversation around the Bulls, right? And one thing that I try to key in on is that K.C. Johnson is great. He's amazing. And I do think a lot of what K.C. Johnson gets is from the front office. And I also think K.C. Johnson is also used to push propaganda sometimes. I don't mean that in a negative light. I mean that in a light of like with the draft. I think that the Bulls are trying to throw other teams off the scent of their draft plans. So I think a lot of what KC has been talking about has been kind of to support that and help push that forward as well, if that makes sense, right? And I think that I'm starting to think more and more that this Bulls team is going to be content taking Asa Newell. Now, I want to be clear. I'm not saying that I even think that. I know that that's the guy initially, early, like towards the end of the season, I was extremely high on Asa Newell, but if you go and watch kind of my draft process, it kind of come down off the Asa Newell thing a little bit. He's still one of my favorite prospects in the draft. That is because of, I look at the defensive versatility that he does bring. He does bring that switchable thing. He is a rim runner. The size thing is a little bit of an issue at 6'9", right at a 7-foot wingspan. If his long-term position is going to be center, that's a little bit concerned there, right? More so than just the height. It's a combination of height and wingspan. A guy like Thomas Sorber, who's 6'9", 6'10", with a 7'5" wingspan, I'm not as worried about it, right? Or Rasheer Fleming, I'm not as worried about his wingspan because it's 7'5", 7'6", right? So I think that it's a combination of those two things. You get people who kind of focus so much on just height alone, and that's not really where I am with it. I get why people do that, but that's not where I am with it. But I think Asa Newell is starting to be somebody that if you just start looking at things, more and more mocks are starting to have Asa Newell go around the Bulls pick, right? And that could be play into the fact that the Bulls are trying to throw teams off that scent a little bit. I also think this. Basically every team in this draft that has multiple first-round picks or we've heard that they're looking to package those first-round picks to move up higher. So if the Bulls do take it, and we talked a little bit about this before, if they do want to take advantage of that and trade back down or something like that, there are a number of teams, Detroit, are one of those teams, right? The Orlando Magic, not Detroit, I'm sorry. The Orlando Nets are one of those teams. The Orlando Magic are one of those teams, right? You have a number of teams that have multiple first-round picks. The Thunder are one of those teams. The Brooklyn Nets are one of those teams, right? We've heard that the Brooklyn Nets want to use their lower pick to move back up early into the lottery. So there's a number of teams that want to do that. I don't know if that fits what the Bulls are trying to do, but those options are out there. So I think there's a lot of movement you're going to see around this draft. I don't know how involved the Bulls are going to be in that, but I do think there is a lot of that. And Asa Newell is somebody that makes some sense. Or the Bulls are maybe considering taking somebody that's projected to go lower, but they don't want a team to pull the trigger on them earlier. Maybe it is one of those teams with 2 first-round picks, or because of the trades. That's a big part of this too, because of the number of teams with multiple first-round picks that could be looking to trade. The Bulls may be wanting to kind of throw teams off the scent because of that, because as of right now, the Houston Rockets have the number 10th overall pick. But who's to say that they come out of that draft with that pick? That could very well be on the move to go elsewhere, right? So because of that type of movement too, is I think where you're seeing that. Atlanta is another team with multiple first-round picks at number 13 and number 22. They're a team that's reportedly looking to move up. So there's a lot there. And so we'll see how it plays out for the Bulls. But I think it's starting to feel like AK may have woken up some. Now, I say may because I got to see the proof in it before I'm willing to give AK any credit for waking up. He has to prove it, and we haven't seen that part of it yet. But it's starting to feel like maybe AK is like, I need to GM this thing up. And we'll see if that ends up being the case. But on today's episode as well, I want to talk about some of the more raw prospects, right? Some of the prospects that Bulls fans, here's the dreaded word, it reminds me of P. Will, right? Like some of those prospects, right? That reminds Bulls fans of P. Will. But here's what I'll say. And I've said this multiple times. We've talked about this over on Locked on Bulls. Going raw and having the skill set of P. Will isn't the problem. P. Will's mindset and his aggression level was the problem. So I'm not against the Bulls. If they go any of the players on this list, I'm not necessarily as worried about it because when I see these players play, they don't show me that type of mentality to where it's a P. Will mentality. It's not that, right? They may have similar traits to P. Will as far as, three-point shooting, defense, being raw prospects that kind of were a little bit more unproven on the NBA level. Keep in mind, like, you had players that like, Zach LaVine was the backup to Norman Powell, something like that. Like, so you see those type of things. Like, and that part plays a part into it as well. It's all about the mentality. So, these guys are the trigger warning list for Bulls fans, but these are some of the more upside guys. One, Carter Bryant. Now, this is a guy that, depending on the mocks that you see, like I think the Ringer has him going 9th overall. Some have him going as low as number like 14, 15, right? It really depends on how you view that upside. But Carter Bryant is a player that I did expect to be mentioned around the Bulls, but really hasn't in this draft process. We really haven't heard much about the Bulls' actual interest in Carter Bryant. Some Bulls fans have definitely brought it up, but I do think Carter Bryant at 6'7", basically a 7-foot wingspan, he fits the kind of physical profile that AK has liked in the past. Now, I do think that his defensive upside is huge. That's the thing that you're looking at for the shot blocking, the floor spacing ability, as well that he does have the off-ball defense. It's all legit. The question about Carter Bryant that you can have there is how much of his offensive skill set is going to round out, but maybe for the Bulls, they're not necessarily looking at that. The defensive playmaking that he has, though, is a huge standout. That is a huge standout for him. He also putbacks. He gets off the ground quickly. So I look at Carter Bryant, and he's a player that typically I would expect the Bulls to be interested in, but from what we've heard, they don't really have a high interest in Carter Bryant, and I'm not mad at that. But I do think Carter Bryant does have one of the highest upsides in this draft. The question is how's the floor, right? And that's the thing that I really want him to take more of a consideration on the floor of some of these players. But Carter Bryant is one of the bigger upside picks potentially in this draft, especially for what he can be defensively. Drawing cops to players like Marvin Williams, Aaron Gordon, Tari Eason, right? Those are some of the players Kamara, right, over in Portland. So the guy has a really good skill set. I think the baseline for his skill set is really good. He does have some court vision. He has some upside of maybe being a point forward at some time, but I'm not necessarily as worried about that, especially with this version of the Bulls team. But if you're looking for a long-term forward mate with Matas Buzelis, I think Carter Bryant could be that. Again, not necessarily as high on him because of the raw thing, but he does have that talent. Then next up, the guy that we talked about the other day, Kaman Malawak, a player that the Ringer does have going to the Chicago Bulls. Very raw, huge raw prospect there. But I think that the floor, the ceiling is a lot higher than people are giving him credit for. I think he is very raw, and the floor is low. But I think, and we have a voicemail on this, so we'll get into more detail there. But I think people aren't looking at the role that he had to play with that Duke team and not necessarily looking at that. There's really good upside there, but it's a concern for some people, and I definitely understand it. My boy Bryant is definitely one of those guys that has that concern over Kaman. Next up, Cedric Howard. Now, I know that calling a 22-year-old a raw prospect sounds weird, right? Because those are the players that you're usually looking at and saying, no, man, how could they be raw at 22 years old in the draft? But he is. And yeah, I think that the defensive versatility and the catch and shoot versatility is something that people are going to fall in love with. But while there was some initial after the combine, huge talks about Cedric Howard moving up into like the top 10, those kind of died down some over time. But Cedric Howard does have a lot of upside. I think when you look at what he did in college, playing for smaller schools, then last year when it was supposed to be his year to take a leap, he played great until he went down with injury and he didn't get to play that many games. But Cedric Howard is another, it'll be purely upside. But I think the floor defensively for Cedric Howard is very high as well. Next up, the player that the Bulls did interview, and that is Drake Powell. Now, I know that Drake Powell has been a lot of what Bulls fans have talked about, P-Will type vibes, right? But I'm not necessarily as worried about that because the P-Will mentality is not the problem with Drake Powell. Drake Powell has that mentality that you're looking for. I do think he is more of a natural catch and shoot player that doesn't create for himself. But when the on-ball creators that the Bulls have had here, I'm not too worried about that per se. And then Juan Behringer. This is the guy that I'm surprised that more and more people aren't talking about Behringer. And that could be because teams realize that you can get a hell of a player for him. And he's slated to go like somewhere in the 20s. And so I don't think he's a threat for the Bulls here at all unless they trade back into the draft and maybe draft him. But 6'11", 230 pounds at 18 years old. I believe he's the second youngest player in this draft. Athleticism, shot blocking, rim running, lob threat, all there right now. And plus the ridiculous upside that's there for. He is one of the players that you look at and it's like, it could really go either way. But what do you see the floor at? I think that the floor for Behringer is Daniel Gafford. I really think that that's the floor for him. Maybe not as physically present as that, but again, 230 pounds at 18. We'll see how much weight he puts on to really bang down low. Over 7 foot wingspan, 6'11". I think this guy is a really gifted modern big man that can guard multiple positions as well. The question is just how raw he is. I think that if Behringer played college basketball here in America, I think that he would easily be a lottery pick because it'd be more exposure to him. Now, that doesn't mean that it's necessarily the things that are concerns about him will go away. I just think he would easily be a lottery pick in that case. But this is the list of the players that I think are the most raw with tremendous upside that it doesn't sound, other than Kaman Malawak and Cedric Howard, who no ceilings has going to the Bulls. I don't know if like Behringer, Carter Bryant, I don't know if they're really on the Bulls' radar. Now, while no ceilings has Cedric Howard going there, I don't know if the Bulls really that. The only players that we know for sure are Drake Powell. We don't even know if they worked out Kaman. So we'll see what happens there. Could be much to do about nothing, but we shall see. But it is Saturday. That means it is mailbag day. Let's get into these voicemails. We got 5 of them, as we do every Saturday. This one's from Mark.
Hey, Hayes. This is Mark calling again. So I called about the Cedric Howard. I had the Cedric Howard review last time. What I said was he isn't an elite player. Now, there's no point of actually drafting him. We want players that we can develop that can be contributed stars. But nonetheless, I don't want to talk about Cedric Howard. He's not a prospect. I don't even think he's on my top 20 on the board. But there are some prospects I do want to talk about that's in the range that I think would be perfect for the Bulls. I'm going to give you 3 prospect names real quick. I'm going to give you, and I know people don't like him, but Derik Queen. Derik Queen may not give you everything athletically that you want. He gives you every skill that you need. Also, I think his name is Asa Newell. I like him as well too. 6'11", power forward / center. He can do rim running. He's actually a good shooter. He's an improving shooter actually. And then I really like. He's a hidden gem, but I really like him. Carter Bryant. He gives me the poor man's. He gives me the poor man's Jason Tatum. I think if you allow him to be a little bit more assertive, I think he can be assertive. He isn't a shy away. He just hasn't developed all of his skills correctly yet. He is a capable shooter, was a defender, a little slow-footed. I don't like the slow-footed thing. I don't like how this era isn't as quick and agile as we were when we were younger. And that's my one major problem about this generation is that everyone has this same exact skill set. Coming out here, I know I'm showing my age here, but graduating in the mid 2000s, everybody's game is completely different. So for me, it's like picking a needle in a haystack when it comes to these prospects. But tell me what you think about the prospects that I named. I know Derik Queen is not a popular pick among people. But if you look past the physical part of it, the physical traits of him, the kid is a black Alfred Sengun. He's a black him or a black Jokic. He can get it done. He can pass. He can shoot. He can score in the low post. I think he would be perfect fit for this Bulls team. But let me know what you think.
I don't think you can really say what Coward is yet because of how raw he is. And I think that he hasn't really gotten an opportunity to show it. But then when he did last year, when he actually was thrust into like a number one role, he looked good. It was just only for 7 games. So he has a lot to show there. As far as you saying Derik Queen brings everything, does he bring defensive switchability? Does he bring rim protection? Does he bring on-ball defense? The answer to those things are no. It seems like, Mark, like you're focused just offensively, and that's fine. He has a really deep bag offensively. But then again, the problem is that he's an on-ball dominant player. The Bulls already have 2 of those. You'll be very hard-pressed to find teams with 3 on-ball dominant players that the offense actually looks good and works out. And I think that's the question with Queen. Like I said over on Locked on Bulls the other day, Derik Queen I'm not mad at as a talent. But when you look at specifically this team, that's where some of that stuff starts falling apart at, right? It's because of, he has had to be in college so far, ball dominant. Josh Giddey, Kobe White, Derik Queen, that's 3 very, very ball dominant players. And keep in mind, none of those players are three-point shooters. So it's not like Josh Giddey's a perimeter three-point threat. Kobe White's he can get hot from 3, but he's not like a catch and shoot three-point shooter, right? He has to be ball dominant. And then primarily he lives off his ability to drive to the rim. So that also brings in congestion there. So I think that you have to think stylistically as well. Now, like I said over on Locked on Bulls, if I don't want them to trade Kobe, if they trade Kobe, then Derik Queen makes a little bit more sense. A lot more sense, actually. So I think that you have to look at those things. And for people who say, well, just draft talent and just throw it out there. When you do that, that's where you're not really getting the best out of any of these players and stuff looks bad because you're not thinking about how the pieces fit together. You can't just hope by osmosis they're going to work together. You have to look at how, where, and the ways that they get their points, not just where they end up scoring at, how do they get there. And there's a lot of similarities between Kobe, Giddey, and Derik Queen on how they create for themselves offensively. And without Giddey being a catch and shoot, Kobe hasn't been a really good catch and shoot player yet into this point of his career. There's just that little bit of concern there. And he doesn't bring any of the defensive stuff that we need. Asa Newell, Carter Bryant. Talked about those guys. I do think, you said like Carter Bryant's like some slept on. Have you actually looked at any draft coverage? Like he's slated to go top 10 by some mock drafts. Carter Bryant isn't some slept on prospect. I think people very well know that Carter Bryant could definitely be a high pick in this draft. And Asa Newell, he does work a lot. Question is that like the position? And I think you have to ask yourself, I know people are like, well, just slide Matas to the 3. Matas hasn't shown any of the shots that he needs to make if he's going to be a modern day 3. Now, maybe he can get there, and I hope that he can get there. But he hasn't shown that yet, if that makes sense. So those are things that we're all still looking for. We'll see. But I like your prospect list overall. We just got to see what the Bulls are going to be looking for. So, all right, let's move into the next one, man. This one's from Reginald.
Hey, this is Reginald. Just calling to essentially voice a complaint. Like, I don't know what direction this Bulls team is going. I mean, I've called, and like a bunch of others, we call about possible trades, possible mock drafts, possible prospect that the Bulls could get, guys they could get for agency. But I have no idea what this team is doing. I mean, when I look at AK, I mean, is he planning on giving Billy Donovan an extension and then drafting to whatever team he envisions, or are they going to fire Billy, for this season, start over again with a new coach who's going to have to, who would then take another direction? I'm not sure what they're doing. Like, calling in about guys like Giannis and KD just to see if you can be a part of a 3-team deal is fine. But, like, what are they expecting to get back? Are they getting back picks? Are they getting back players? Are they just doing that for the salary cap release so they can make a move in this year's free agency? I mean, trying to bank on free agency in 2026 when for the last 2 decades the Bulls really haven't been able to make a big splash because the franchise itself is so rudderless. I guess agents just tell their guys, like, there's really no point in going there unless you can get the bag. But I don't know. It's just frustrating seeing a team you watch for so long and dedicate so much time to just fumble everything that they're doing. And now, best you can do is like hope for the best, but experience telling you should expect the worst. But what's your opinion? Thanks.
First off, shout out to Reggie for improving the call quality for once. Look, I got to give Reggie some credit there. That is a much better call quality than what you've called in for. But I listened to the second voicemail you left that's probably going to be played on tomorrow's episode a little bit. Sounded rough again, my boy. So whatever you did on this call, keep doing that. Now, as far as what direction the Bulls are going, I think they've started down the path of direction, right? The Josh Giddey trade was part of that. They are now going clearly younger. They're trying to develop, and I think they're going to do this thing more organically over time, which means that you're probably not going to see the big splash moves. You're going to see smart, calculated moves that fit in. What did we hear from Casey Johnson? The Bulls aren't necessarily looking at position. They're looking at best player available, but player that also fits with the roster, that fits with the scheme and the style that they want to play. So it seems like they have picked a direction. They just haven't gotten a chance to, well, they've had years to have a chance. So, but they're just now getting to the point of really establishing what the roster needs to look like with that direction that they've picked, and that's where it seems like they're going. But listen, AK, like I've said before, this is your offseason at GM. Go in there and GM this thing up. Let's see what you can bring. So we shall see. All right, let's get into the next one, man. This one's from Will.
Yo. Peace, Hayes. Peace. It's Mr. Sagittarius King. You probably seen me on the comments in the past, but I want to address something real quick that was on my mind. I wanted to bring it to your attention, so to speak. I remember that the report came out that the Bulls passed up on a first round pick for Lonzo Ball, and it got me to thinking. I think that pick that they passed up was with the Grizzlies, I believe. And it was really to get off of Marcus Smart's contract. And they would have took back Lonzo Ball's contract, which was expiring. It's the deal that the Washington Wizards wind up doing with the Grizzlies later. They wound up dumping Marcus Smart's contract to the Wizards, and I think they took back Marcus Bagley and I think Johnny Davis in that deal. And that's the number 18th pick that the Wizards have in this upcoming draft. So my bigger point is I don't have no trust in AK. It's been 5 years. And in 5 years, he hasn't made, to me, any significant moves to acquire more assets. Now, I get when he first came in, he was trying to be competitive, but after the Lonzo Ball injury, it's just time and time again, bad moves or mediocre moves to not acquire draft assets to give you a shot to go get a certain player or to get a high-level role player or a star, to add to the roster. If you're going to go young players with experience, if you had the draft picks, other people's draft picks because you have your own. You could make a deal to go after a guy like Trey Murphy. I think Trey Murphy is a budding potential all-star in the league. But I just think that the mismanagement of assets, the lack of not getting extra draft capital and deals has hurt the Bulls and his negligence on the front office. But I wanted to bring that Lonzo Ball deal up because that was.
First of all, bro, your mama names you William. We're gonna call you William Thompson. It's Sagittarius King. No, your name's Will, my boy. Name's Will. And that's perfectly fine, right? And then you got so long-winded, my boy, you didn't even get to finish your complete thought before the 3-minute limit hit. Come on, my boy. What are we doing here, Will? But no, AK has dropped the ball a lot on gaining more assets. You think back to Andre Drummond. The Philadelphia 76ers offered 2 second-round picks. You held on to him. He ended up signing there as an unrestricted free agent anyway. Now you don't have second-round picks. The Lonzo Ball trade that you brought up, right? Like, I think when it comes down to is like, that is one thing that AK has failed at. It's like he doesn't value stacking assets and what that can get. I think AK has this look of it's like, what are second-round picks going to do for me? When you don't really think, like, second-round picks can be used as filler in trades. Those are what can puff trades up a little bit more. That second-round picks, we've seen teams use second-round picks to move up in the draft, right, with their own picks. So, like, AK has to have a better understanding of that, and I hope that he will at some point. Because that is kind of, especially when you're going to be younger, that's an opportunity for you to kind of step those things up. Now, as far as like players like Trey Murphy that you brought up and things like their Bulls don't have the assets to get a guy like that. They just don't have the assets to get a guy like that. But, we'll see what happens in the future. All right, let's get into this next one, man. This one's from Mello.
Yo, what's going on, Hayes? It's Mello. I was just watching your clip this morning on Bull Central talking about the Kobe situation in Orlando, making a trade possibly for him if the Bulls want to get rid of him. And now I want to touch on the Marlowe situation too. First, the Kobe thing, if, like, I'm with you with I don't really want to move him, because, like you said, this will be the first time he's coming into a season with the same role that he had from the season prior. So maybe this will just be a season where he might really blow up. He's coming in, he had a whole off season just focused on things that he needs to work on and not changing his position. That might be key. So I feel you on that. But if Orlando's willing to give up all that, it actually fits. And I agree with you also on the Jonathan Isaac thing. As far as Cole Anthony, he's washed. Like, he's done. The worse his hairline gets, the worse his game gets. I don't know what it is. But, that's a wash. But if we get him back along with Isaac and a pick, then it makes sense. I understand that. And as far as the Marlowe situation, if he does drop and he's there, if he's the best player available, I wouldn't mind picking him up because a lot of people saw how Duke used him and think that was like his game. His game was limited to that, offensively at least. And when I watched him in the Olympics, when they played against Team USA and he was in the Olympics, he actually can hit a jumper, from all the way out to 3. He can stretch the floor, actually. I've seen him put the ball on the floor a couple of times. He's a rim runner. He can run the floor well. But they didn't really use him the way, at least the things that he can actually do. I guess they didn't really have to, with the team that they had. But I think he could actually be a lot better offensively than what people think because of what I did see in the Olympics, because that's what people really started to notice him and speak about him big and then him going to Duke. So I just wanted to get your opinion on that. All right, man. Talk to you soon. See red.
All right. The Magic trade offer for Kobe, like I said, I think at that point you're valuing the 16th overall pick and who you can get for it. And in this draft, that could be the difference between walking away in this draft with just like a Thomas Sorber, for example, or Asa Newell or Cedric Howard, to then walk away with Cedric Howard and Danny Wolf, or Cedric Howard and Thomas Sorber, like whatever you want to look at it. Like that's what that would do. And if the Bulls really value what those young guys can bring to the team, then maybe they do that, right? Again, I've been in the mindset, don't trade Kobe, but we'll see. Now, I think you hit the nail on the head when it comes to Kaman Malawak, right? I think that, people don't really, they look at the result. There's a lot of box score watchers when it comes to draft coverage because they don't have time to watch college basketball, and that's fair. But yeah, I think when you look at what he was asked to do there, that you can clearly see he wasn't doing things that were in his skill set. That's why I like when Coop went down, he was able to do a little bit more of that. Or like you pointed out, when he was playing with his national team, he was able to do a little bit more. So I think there's a lot of skill set that people don't see yet with Kaman because of the role that he played in college. I definitely think that that's a part there, but we'll see that. The floor is still a concern, but I do like Kaman, and if the Bulls did draft him, of course I'd root for him, and I'd understand the pick there. I think that he has one of the highest upsides in the draft, especially when you look at the fact he's only been playing basketball for like 4 years. So I definitely think that that's definitely a possibility there. All right, let's get into the last one, man. This one's from Joe.
What's up, CEO Hayes? This is Joe. We talked one time over that Derrick Rose thing where, like millions, I wanted Derrick Rose to retire in Chicago. But the thing I'm calling you about now is I think there's one guy that's been under the radar for a lot of people. And I don't know if New Orleans would be willing to trade him. But, man, unlike a lot of people, I see a lot of Steph Curry in that dude. Stacey King does too, and that's Jordan Hawkins. I think if we were to go for anybody for some scoring punch off the bench, man, I see that dude putting up 17, 18 a game if we gave him some time. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you can think of any trade packages that we could offer for that, man. All right, man. I'll be looking for myself in the episode on Saturday and Sunday, brother. Have a good one.
Jordan Hawkins, I like him. I don't know about the Steph comps though, but I'll say this: like you got to keep in mind, he was a lottery pick, number 14 in the 2023 draft. And while we've heard that the Pelicans are open to moving everybody on their roster, that doesn't mean they're just trading players away, or just giving players away. So I think that you would have to give up a lot for Jordan Hawkins. Now, if the Bulls moved on from Kobe and brought in Hawkins, he has a more natural catch and shoot ability, but I wouldn't want to do that. I do think he has some upside for sure, but you're not going to get him for cheap. It's not as simple as you calling up the Pelicans, getting Jordan Hawkins, and then walking away from it. So we'll see. He's not a bad player to target. I just think it'll be difficult because I think it'll cost something decent to get him in the door. So we'll see what happens there. But that's my time for today. That's the mailbag. Make sure you guys are following us at Bull Central Pod. You send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, bullcentralpod@gmail.com. Lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We're the number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related, but that's thanks to you, lovely and beautiful people. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See you right if you can, y'all.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.